Hey, we're back, everybody. Dr. Z, what do we got today? Tip of the day, tip of the day, tip of the day. Dr. Z, what's our tip for today?
Well, we're going to be talking about the benefit of confident decision making. So maybe not always a knee-jerk decision, but confident decision making as a vital part of self-care.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the topic goes along with Patrick and I have both been doing a book called The Magic.
Right.
And it's about gratitude and being grateful. And talking about confident decision making, I wanted to talk about being grateful for the decisions that our past selves have made.
Okay. Good, bad, or indifferent, or what?
Well, I think because it's interesting. So we'll talk more about this, but I feel like maybe I haven't been as appreciative of the decisions that my past self has made that have gotten me to the level of success where I am right now. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about how we often associate self-care with things like, getting a spa day, going for a massage, maybe doing some yoga. But have you ever considered that confident decision making is an integral aspect of self-care? So, making decisions with clarity and conviction not only steers your life in the direction that you desire, but it also nurtures your mental and emotional well-being.
Okay.
And so there's three main areas that I wanted to talk about. So number one is how confident decision making reduces your stress and anxiety.
Okay.
We talk a lot about self-care in terms of helping us to manage stressful situations. So what I wrote here is one of the main sources of stress in modern life is the immense volume of decisions that we have to make on a daily basis, from choosing what clothes to wear, what food to eat, what career path to choose.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be daunting. But indecision or prolonged rumination over decisions can actually lead to more anxiety.
Yeah.
So I think about the fact, and we're going to talk about values here, because when I made the decision to go to medical school, sometimes I feel like, well, was I totally 100% sure that was the right decision? And then I'm like, well, I don't know. I wasn't really sure. But I remember, maybe my parents would be like, well, what else do you want to do? And I was like, well, I don't really know.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I value is having a plan, having a defined, steps to take to get to where you want to go. And medicine did that for me. It gave me that plan. I knew the steps. I knew what to do year 1, year 2. There was never really a thought in my mind that I wouldn't finish, that I wouldn't graduate. And so it gave me a plan and a purpose and a direction for my life. And when I think back now about some of the different avenues I've maybe taken or gone into, I may not have always had the best outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I've gone outside of my lane. And that's not to say that it was necessarily a bad thing, but maybe not as well thought out.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. So that was well thought out. First off, fast forwarding to today, do you feel like, even though your horizons are on different things and you're in a new chapter of your life, do you feel like you're looking back, you're like, I'm glad I made that decision because it put me in a good position, oftentimes financially, this, that, and the other?
Yeah. And actually, the times when I have gotten myself into some financial difficulties, it is nice that I have a job that's still in demand,
Yeah.
that I can go back to and still provide a service. I mean,
Hmm.
I do provide a valuable
Right.
service for the people that I serve.
Okay.
So I do want to say that in terms of lowering stress and anxiety, I really do appreciate my job.
Yeah. So talk some more about how that was a great, well, you touched on that. That was a great decision. What are some things you've learned about some of the, we were just talking before we started to hit the record button about how my observance of you has noticed that there's a tendency to not always think things through or be as diligent as it would be within your best interest to be, right, to be diligent around especially big decisions. When you're making a big decision, talk
Yeah.
about that a
Yeah,
bit.
sometimes I do get ahead of myself.
Yeah.
I do tend to get ahead of myself. Maybe wanting an experience, or maybe even imagining, that it'll turn out, maybe some magical thinking, right? Like it's going to turn out fine.
Yeah.
And trusting that I will make it, I will survive, whatever happens. And so I think there's part of that. I don't know if it's an overconfidence, or maybe that's a fine line.
Yeah.
But
Maybe it's part of that. I'm just going to go for it and see what happens.
yeah, I think because maybe there is a part of me that comes out that every now and maybe a little rebellious part that
Yeah.
says, I'm going to try something different.
Yeah.
I'm going to see what's going to happen with this. And it's interesting because as a doctor, our lives for so many years is very defined and rigid, and you don't have as much opportunity maybe to experience some freedoms. Some people that go backpacking through Europe. I mean, I just never did any of that. And so maybe sometimes things build up, maybe some pent up, like the grass is greener on the other
Hmm.
side. But then also recognizing that that tendency is there. And so maybe there are ways that I could be more consistent in allowing that expression, so that
What does that mean?
well, sometimes what I find on a micro, okay, so on a smaller scale, when somebody is so diligent with their diet, let's say,
Yeah.
and then they will go for like weeks and weeks and weeks, they're like, I'm not gonna eat that, I'm not gonna eat that, I'm not gonna eat that. And then something happens.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden they just dive in. Somebody makes some brownies and they dive in. Before I knew it, they've eaten like 12 brownies. And so I said, is it is it possible to allow that little bit of self-expression, that little bit of rebellious part that wants to come out,
Hmm.
maybe on a more regular basis? Maybe find some ways every single day to let it come out in a small scale,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't build up over time to where it might, crash and burn.
Which leads to my way of thinking about it, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
So, and that's a problem that a lot of us have. We get into this knee jerk, and all of a sudden we're behind the eight ball, and we just maybe went completely unconscious,
Yeah.
and we snapped for whatever reason, had all those brownies, and then from there it just escalated downhill. Whereas if you look at it the other way and say, I got to get a hold of this, but
Mhm.
I'm going to treat myself, but moderately.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the things that we did with coaching is to have a day where you could have a treat. And not the whole day, not the treat day, but a treat meal, or maybe
Yeah.
have something at a particular meal, so that you knew once a week it was coming. You could prepare for it ahead of time using your higher brain
Yeah, yeah.
of planning and decision making, so that you still allow that sense of freedom, but it's within the parameters that you've set for yourself.
Yeah, I love this topic of decision making, everybody, because it applies to every aspect of our lives. I've thought about, man, I wonder if I could write a book on decision making.
Mm.
It could be done. I don't know. I haven't decided if that's the route I want to go just yet. But thinking about all the decisions that I've made, the things I've watched you decide on, all these different things that come up in our lives. One thing I wanted to talk about was how if you're going to make these big financial or job wise, there's these decisions, they need to be thought out carefully. And as I've gotten older, I've noticed that I've become way more conservative. I've always been fairly conservative in decision making, but I like to use the analogy of football, right? Because I'm a sports guy. And, the big thing nowadays is teams, let's go for it. 4th and a yard. We can get that. And you're seeing it so drastic nowadays where in the past teams would go for it. And the thing that became popular was going for it where you're just outside of kicking a field goal and getting points. And you're like, well, we might make it, but if we pick up this first down, we can keep going. We might score a touchdown. Now teams are doing it on their own side of the field, on their 25, 30-yard line, which is just seems crazy to me. But if you had a strong defense and you're like, okay, we can take this chance early on in the game because we could rebound from it.
Mm-hmm.
That may be some of the thinking that you want to employ if you're going to be doing that for yourselves. How will I be able to bounce back? Will I be able to bounce back? Will this devastate me? If it's going to devastate me from a confidence standpoint, clearly, I think that's why I love the whole idea of a book on decision making, because I think, and I've experienced, the better you get at decision making, the more confident you become
In
and the more
life.
successful you'll be in business. And there's many ways about it. We could talk for a long time about this topic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the second thing actually is interesting because you talked about just in life is if it fosters personal growth.
Yeah,
It says
totally.
here, every time you make a decision with confidence, you're affirming your ability to trust yourself. The sense of
Yeah.
self trust is a pillar of self esteem and personal growth. As you encounter and navigate challenges, your belief in your capacity to handle them grows, leading to a more robust and resilient mindset.
Yeah.
Furthermore, even if a decision doesn't turn out as planned, the experience gained is invaluable. It's not about making perfect decisions, but about learning, adapting, and evolving with each choice.
Yeah. So there's some silver lining in that too. Because even if you do make a decision, and I think about the one in real estate when you and I got together, you bought this house and you wanted to flip it, and you ended up holding as a rental. And long term, all's well that ends well, right? It worked out in the end. It didn't go quite the way you planned it originally, but it did end up working out. And I just want to speak to the part of even if you do make a decision, a lot of times we get caught up in this analysis paralysis, right? Oh, gee, I don't know. Oh, dear. Oh, my. Should I? Blah, 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 blah. And you get stuck and you just make the decision, go with your gut. Because even if it doesn't work out, like in this case, this example that I just brought up, you're going to learn some stuff. And the idea is to make decisions that are wise decisions that even if they don't turn out the way you drew it up in your mind, you're going to learn some stuff and you're going to advance. You're going to grow no matter what it is, what career you're in. We're both in real estate. So we've had a ton of experiences where real estate is a fickle business. It doesn't always work out the way that you drew it up and you think it's going to go.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of learning lessons, but still plotting forward and doing things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really true. And it is a lesson in trusting yourself. I mean, every day you wake up maybe and the first thing on your mind is, should I have made that decision? But if you follow that, emotion, if you follow that feeling and spend time in those feelings, there's wisdom.
Yeah.
There's wisdom in that. And you gain more of an understanding and an appreciation of who you are based on the way you feel and the actions that you took. So it's actually is a real educational personal growth opportunity.
Plus, if you think about it, the things that really feel in the moment, man, that stung, or man, that was painful, or wow, that was, oh my God, how did I survive that? Right? Those are the things that you remember the most, and those are the things that really help you grow the most, because you're like, that was so horrible. I don't ever want that to happen again.
Yeah.
So there is a silver lining oftentimes when you're in the real time, the moment of the situation, you're like, oh man, this is horrible. And it gets pretty dark, which I've had that. Let's face it, we've all had that happen.
Yeah.
If you live long enough, some crap's going to happen to you. So.
For sure. And then the third one is it cultivates authenticity. Confident decision making allows you to shape your life in alignment with your values and desires. Rather than being swayed by external pressures or fleeting trends, you're better equipped to make choices that reflect your true self. So that's what I said. Even if the decision making doesn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, it is a learning opportunity. And really, it does get to a deeper layer of values, So even though I valued those blueprint tendencies of having a pattern, having a plan, there was still that value of, freedom and fun and, maybe seeing what's on the other side of things. What was it backpacking through Europe?
When did you go
No,
backpacking through Europe?
no, I know. No, I didn't. But I always kind of had that little bit of like, wow, what if I would have done that? Like I knew people who did that.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. So there was still that value. There's still that part of me that likes the adventure, that likes
Yeah.
the idea of, maybe going somewhere on a, you know, outback
A safari
a
or
safari,
something.
yeah, that part of me that's never done that before. So I think, honoring that part of myself and maybe just finding a way to honor it in a way, especially as I'm getting older, right? Like you said, the further down the line, it's harder to recover from
Yeah.
some of these missteps and
Yeah.
mishaps. But how can you satisfy that desire for an experience or creating this extraordinary life for yourself that doesn't have an overall negative or detrimental effect on you, and
Nice.
allows for connection? I think that was living authentically boosts happiness, fosters a deeper connection with others, and infuses life with a sense of purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So as we wrap up here, what would you say is like the biggest benefit for you in terms of self-care, connecting decision making to self-care? How do you think it's helped your self-care? And how do you
Mm.
think your decision making has changed from when you were just starting out and you made that decision to become a doctor to where you are today?
Yeah, I actually like it. Good, bad, or indifferent. A lot of bumps along the way.
Yeah.
I still like it. I like that I set that foundation for myself
Hmm.
early, and I really just have to learn to just be more thankful and grateful for my past self
Hmm.
who made the decisions that got me where I am, and also for my future self who still continues to reach forward and just helping and guiding that future self with my values and that overall sense of purpose
Hmm.
and legacy. As we're getting older and we're
Yeah.
thinking about legacy and what is what do we want to leave for the
Yeah.
next generations? How can my life continue to be a source of, inspiration, motivation, for myself as well as for other people?
Nice. Yeah, I think when I put these two together, I think about the decisions that I've made a ton of really good ones, and for every good one, I've probably made a couple bad ones. But that's how you learn,
Yeah.
right? So to sum it all up, I think from my point of view, the decisions that I make these days and as I've gotten older and become wiser and learned through life's experiences, be diligent, right? When you're making decisions, really think them out thoroughly. Try not to do this knee-jerk reaction when you're in a conversation. Maybe you develop this habit of counting to 10 or 5 or whatever before you respond to somebody and say, is this going to be really dumb? Or is this appropriate in a conversation? And then when you're thinking about decisions that you make, especially as you get older, I think it's really important. And I think that's why wisdom plays a huge part. Because the last thing I want to say about it is when you make good decisions, you do the due diligence around it all, that's going to lower your stress level, because you're going to say to yourself, hey, I checked all the boxes, I went through it, and I made what I felt was the best decision at that time. And you're going to sleep better at night. And when you're more diligent around things, big, smaller, medium, whatever it is, decisions, whatever has to be made, the more you think about it and really run it through your mind, the better off you're going to be.
And does this get me closer to where I really want to go, or is it ultimately going to pull me further away? And
Right.
using that as your guide.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there, everybody. And as always, thank you in advance.
Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Yeah, we're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning.